Hi, welcome to Nancy Jean's Garden again. It is the 8th of December, and today I'm going to talk about ghosts and guides, both of which have been things that have happened around me and have made me aware of my own powers, how to work with them, made me aware of what I wanted to do with them and what I didn't want to do with them. So we're going to start with the ghost story, although I realize it's Christmas season and you're really supposed to, the only ghost story that really fits is Christmas Carol, but mine kind of works because my ghost story starts in London. In 1966, I was touring with a choir of American students from all over the country who were singing and playing musical instruments in all big capitals of Europe. And London was our first big stop after we'd spent a week in Amsterdam training and learning how to sing together. And we were in this lovely old grand Victorian hotel, the kind of things you would expect to see Sherlock Holmes walking out of. It had the old elevators that they call lifts, and they literally lift you. They have a little thing you pull. And it was very ornate, and we were in a suite of rooms. My particular group of girls, we were in a suite of rooms. We had big old giant feather beds, and just it was a lovely old Victorian place. And we ate dinner and breakfast, lunch, and dinner around in the hotel, and it was just it was London. The hotel was very crowded, and we found out there'd been a dock strike on the coast of London, and so all of the people who were supposed to get on cruise ships and go around Europe were stuck. And this was in June, so they were kind of stuck in London. Actually, the backup had come to London, so every room in the hotel was full, and we were having great fun running around and being in London, going to Carnaby Street and all that good stuff that you did in the 60s in London. Well, one of the guys came to me one day and he said, there's something weird in our room. And I said, looking at the four guys who were living in the room, I had no doubt there was something weird in that room, but not what they meant. And what happened was one of the kids had woken up and all of his clothes had been tied in knots in the closet. And another kid had similar sorts of things. His stuff had been turned over and sort of messed with. And they thought these other guys had done it. And the one guy, Froggy, that was his name. He was obviously the bass singer in the choir. He was in the room, and he was in the room that wasn't affected. And he said, Nancy, I don't know why I know, but you know about this stuff. Well, I had read Hans Holzer's books, and I knew about his work with hauntings in the East. I'd never done anything with hauntings. I knew I could read cards. That was all I knew. And I said, well, sure, we can go look at it. So Sue and another friend of mine went to their room with them, and we looked, and it was really weird because these rooms were suites of rooms. So you could go in the two guys who'd been affected, and the room was damp, and it was cold, and all that ghost hunter stuff that you hear about. You go in the other rooms, and they were sunny, and they were fine. So we went and met in the big main room, and I was talking to him, and I said, well, I just don't know what to say. I mean, yeah, there's something weird in those rooms. They just don't feel the same. And right as I finished saying that, all the windows in the room went black. And I mean, it's as if someone had thrown giant black shutters over those windows. And in the middle of the ceiling was a candelabra kind of thing, chandelier. And it had those little lights that could flicker down to nothing. And all you could barely see was the filament. The whole room was absolutely dark, except for Froggy. And Froggy was very light and very pale, and he was changing. There was a man walking through him towards me. And I don't know how I knew what was about to happen, but I turned and ran and grabbed the doorknob and threw that door open and got the hell out of there. And it was, and I was out in the hallway. Sue and the other girl were not 2 steps behind me. And we were out in the hallway, and Froggy came out, and he didn't look like himself. And he said, he needs you. And he pointed at me, and I said, nah, no, he doesn't. And maybe not, and I'm out of here. And I went down to my room, and we went and hid in our rooms and said, what the hell was that? And so that night, we sang a concert in a concert hall. And when they dimmed the lights in that concert hall, the whole bunch of us that had been in that room just about jumped out of our skins, because it's exactly what it was like. And when we came back to the hotel, we couldn't talk to anybody about it because girls weren't supposed to be in boys' rooms. I mean, it was that part was part of the 60s too. So I went into my bedroom that night and went to sleep and didn't think anything about it. And that night, one of the hotel staff found me in the hallway trying to open the lift door. We were on the 5th floor. Not a good idea to open the lift door. So he directed me back to my room thinking I was sleepwalking, and had the girls sit with me. And then later some people showed up, and it ends up that they were with the hotel, and it ends up the hotel had rented that room the boys were in, and they're not supposed to because it was infamously haunted. And the guy who had lived in that room had also died in the hotel and had negative impressions on people since then. So since we were leaving the next morning, they weren't going to force me to leave the hotel, although the police would rather that they had. I got on the bus the next day and wrote in my diary all about this and kind of tucked it away like nothing I ever wanted to run into again. And I said to whatever runs my world, that's that part of it, I said, no more ghosts, no more disembodied guys, no more haunted rooms. Made it the rest of the way through Europe, had a lovely time. It had kind of opened up a part of my brain, and that's why I bring it up. Running into that situation opened up a part of my brain I didn't know was there. And so for the rest of the trip, I could describe our hotel rooms. I could do remote viewing. I could see things that I had never seen, and I could describe them with great intricate detail. We went through all of Europe. I came home, kind of tucked it away, and was like, we're not going to talk about this. And Sue actually happened to live in my hometown, and we kind of both tucked it away in the back of our minds. And then I've told that story to people, and they kind of look at me funny. And a couple of years ago, I found the diary I kept every day when I was in Europe. And besides being the diary of a 16-year-old girl who was boy crazy, there is this story of what happened. And I thought, well, people are going to look at that and they're going to say, well, you wrote it, While I was going through all my stuff from the trip to Europe, Sue and I had reconnected, and she had lost all of her stuff from Europe. So I was going through and scanning and copying all of the brochures and things that I had collected while we were on the trip. And in my stuff that I had not seen since 1966, and this was 2018, it was yeah. And I found where Sue had decided to keep a diary like I was, and she had picked up paper in a stationery in the hotel in Holland, and she had been writing up, and she had written a whole description about the weird room in the hotel in London. So now there was 2 of us. So I know I didn't make this one up, but it did wake up something in me. It also woke up something in her, and she has gone ahead and used her powers in a different way. So those things happen. And I decided then, and I have made a bargain with the universe, I don't want to be a medium. I don't want to talk to people on the other side. I don't want to walk into weird hotel rooms. So that's number 1. So I never really got into the whole I've got a guide thing. I knew I had guides. I knew I had someone or some meaningful entity giving me information that I shouldn't know, but I didn't know who it was, and I wasn't terribly concerned about that. And then I went to, in 2018, I think also in the fall, I went and saw Weiss in Austin. And he is the guy who wrote, if you've never read the book, Many Lives, Many Masters, you need to find that book. It's interesting. And he mass hypnotized, there were 800 people in this ballroom. He mass hypnotized 800 people 5 times. And one of the times that he worked with us, he said, we're going to see if we can take you back to where you can meet a guide, one of your guides. And I was like, not what I want to do, but I'm here. So I got hypnotized, and all of a sudden when I opened my eyes, I was standing in a pre-revolutionary colonial kitchen in the South. And I knew I was in the Carolinas, and I don't know how I knew I was in the Carolinas, but I was in this really old fashioned with giant hearth and the old long wooden tables. And I felt someone beside me, and I turned around, I looked, and there was a woman standing there, a tall, elegant, statuesque African-American. And I looked at her and I said, are you my guide? My name is Nancy. And she said, I know your name is Nancy, and yes, I'm your guide. And I said, do you have a name? And she told me her name was Addie. And I said, well, I hope you haven't felt slighted because I haven't come looking for you. And she said, no, it's okay. She said, you did what you're supposed to do. You listened. And, I have helped you. I've been here with you. And I said, okay. And I said, we're a long time ago. And she said, yes, we're in a very long time ago. And I said, well, I don't quite know what to say to you. And I said, I guess, why am I here? If you're a guide and what's sort of your orders to keep my ship afloat? And she said, come with me. So I went across the kitchen with her. And I don't know if you've ever been in one of those really old kitchens, but they didn't put cabinets in square like we do with cabinet doors like this. They built their cabinets in the corners. Their cupboards were in the corners. And she took me across to this corner cupboard, and she said, open it. And I opened it, and I looked in, and I was like, this is a mess. I said, this is so disorganized. This is like Fibber McGee's closet, if you remember Fibber McGee and Molly, which was a radio show. When he opened his closet, all kinds of stuff used to fall out. And she said, yes. And I said, and I looked at her, and she said, but that's what you do. You take people to open up those corner cupboards in their lives that are a mess, and you try to help them straighten it out. And that's why you're here. I went, oh. And actually, when I came back and told friends of mine who've worked with me and have done readings and have been around me, they go, yeah, it's pretty much true. That's what you do. People come to you and say, what's going on? And you say, look at this, and these are solutions, and pick what you want to do, because I'm a big believer in free will. So I turned and I looked at Addie, and I said, how did you get here? And she said, I said, you're a human. Were you a human in this time? And she said, oh, yes, I was a human in this time. And I said, so you kept this place going? And she laughed, and she said, these white folks wouldn't have made it without me being here, which I totally believe. She's a very commanding woman. And then I said, well, why did you come here? And she said, well, she was a volunteer, which means she was a soul that didn't really have to come back. She chose to come back in that time because she knew her people were going to be displaced, and they were going to need a being or an entity or an energy that had more knowledge than they had, and in order to survive and make it. So after she told me that, I said, well, that's interesting. And she said, oh, and I said, you look really familiar. I guess that's from you being my guide all these years. And she said, no, you have met one of my genetic descendants. And I went, oh. And then I woke up. And then I went through the rest of the day, and we learned about psychometry and a lot of fun stuff. If you ever go see this man speak, go see him speak. He also has a lot of stuff on YouTube you can go look up. So anyway, I came home, back up from Austin to Dallas, and I thought about what I'd seen and thought about her, and then tried talking to her, and I found out I could come talk to her. I could do some automatic writing and talk to her. And that basically I've developed confidence over time that Addie is here. She's here with me. I have another guide named Frank. That's another story for another day. But today, the card I pulled from the Inner Child deck, which is, something I do every day, was Cinderella. And if you know anything about Cinderella, Cinderella is the story of the girl who gets shunted by her stepmother and then by miracles from either her mother or her fairy godmother, depending on which version of the tale you read. She ends up being the prettiest thing at the ball and has her whole world turned upside down and goes and lives happily ever after. Now, the happily ever after part, we don't really know about. But in the traditional tarot, that card, 18, is the tower, and the tower is the star. The star comes immediately after the tower, where everything's fallen down, and you have to go and sort of resurrect and remake yourself. So I thought about that when I was thinking about ghosts and guides, and really, both of those experiences were tower moments for me. And when I came out, I had a new star to follow, just like Cinderella does in the picture, a new way to look up at the sky and a new awakening of that part of myself. In this case, she's looking at the moon. It can be the stars, but when you look up and you realize where I am now and where I can be are two totally different places. So, other ways to meet your guides. There are a lot of meditations about meeting guides. How important do I think they are? I work perfectly fine for years without, I was 67, 68 when I found out who my guide was. You can do it with automatic writing. You can do it with any number of things. And do I think it's absolutely necessary to know where you're going? No. But I think we all have guides and we all have that little voice behind us. In my case, it's Addie. And it's well worth kind of looking at for yourself to think about it, because she's added a dimension to my understanding of the other side. And if that's what you're looking for, there's one more tip in how to make your life grow in the metaphysical world. And with that, I'm going to close it down, except to say that I'm going to be with Lilac Lantern Tarot on Thursday evening, the 10th, at 7 her time, 6 Central Standard Time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we're going to do a deep dive and looking at readings and grids and how to make a grid out of a reading and all that good stuff. So if you're interested in that, come over and visit us over there. Andrea is just a lovely person and has generously wanted to share her time with me. Thank you so much for being here today, and love and light. See you later.